Do you want to bust your sales quota? Do you want to join the ranks of top 1% sellers? The Top 1% Sellers podcast gives you the insights and the tools to help you achieve your sales greatness. The podcast features sales and services professionals, leaders, and experts to give you the edge you're looking for. Here's your host, Ash Sadiq.
Welcome everyone to the Top 1% Sellers podcast series. My guest today is Ron Ricci. He's a Vice President at Cisco Systems, and I'm going to give Ron an opportunity to introduce himself a bit more, and then we'll delve deeper into a conversation that's focused on powerful communications in an X as a service world, and see lots of viewpoints on that, and then take a look at how sellers can really get good at communicating the value proposition in this particular tumultuous changes happening in high tech, and also for how customers are adopting and consuming technology. So with that, Ron, welcome.
Ash, it's a pleasure to see you again and hear from you, and congratulations on the great work around Top 1%. We're all trying to get there, so appreciate giving us a big golden bar to get to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. I want to take a minute here, just give the audience a sense of what you're doing today, what you're seeing happening in high tech, and we'll then get into more questions in a bit.
Sure. Let me tell everybody what I do just for context. I do work in Cisco sales, and I provide my team and I 4 sales experiences for sellers. So we're responsible for the experience executive teams have, and they come through our executive experience centers here in San Jose and around the world. Second, I manage the demonstrations team at Cisco. Third, our proof of concept labs team. And then fourth, our global proposals organization. All in all, my team will be responsible for about 500,000 customer experiences on behalf of sellers in the next fiscal year, or over 2017, as we say here at Cisco. So it's a pretty big footprint, and that means I think I have the best job in the company, because I spend all day long with customers and watching sales teams interact with customers and helping them to try to advance their goals and their relationships down the road a bit. So it's a great question because I do think customers are at a very interesting time right now when they're looking at technology. And I'll offer a thought for you and your listeners about really where customers are in their journey. And I think, you and I have known each other for quite a while, and I know you're a thought leader in your own right. You've been sort of watching and leading some of the trends of the industry. About 4 years ago, we started talking about this thing called Internet of Things.
Yes.
Right? Then quickly it became the Internet of Everything, right? And then after that, it became digitization. And digitization really is sort of the core conversation that customers are having today. And I'd say that here in the Cisco San Jose Customer Experience Center, Ash, the number one question that we're asked by customers today is how will digitization impact either the customer or employee experience?
Yes, and I've seen that a lot, because as I mentioned, I was speaking with another guest here on the podcast. We were talking about digitization, the digital vortex, and how much change that's generating for a lot of companies. And as you are going through those customer conversations, and of course the move towards X as a service, what are you seeing as being sort of the top ask for these customers these days? Are they trying to shift completely to an X as a service model? Where are they in that transition?
Terrific question. And I think, the way that I like to think about that is sort of what phase is the customer mindset in as it looks at digitization and some of these incredible X as a service opportunities. And if you think about it, at the beginning of the IoT, IoE revolution 4 or 5 years ago, people were asking a lot of why questions, like, why should I care about this, right?
Yes.
And then maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it was, well, what can I do about that now that I know that I should really be caring and excited about that? And then I think in the last year, we've seen a fundamental shift in the way customers think, to move not to why should I care or what should I do, but to how should I do it?
Yes.
And it's in the how phase right now. And I think fundamentally to your question is organizations examine the how phase. It sort of doesn't matter what industry you're in. You're in some transition from offering something that looks like a product to something that has essentially a service characteristic to it.
Exactly.
Whether that service characteristic is self-serve or whether it's some B2B video-based delivered service while you're moving around like we are right now. that's the consideration is how to service enable via digitization the core business model and processes of companies. But it's in the how phase. No one knows exactly what all the answers are going to be. I just know now that it's no longer a boardroom conversation where we wonder if we should think about this.
Yeah.
It's let's go explore. So companies are actively exploring and they're actively experimenting, and a few thought leaders are actually doing it.
Amazing. I want to reflect with you on not just what Cisco is doing, but perhaps what high-tech companies are doing. Maybe you see them doing and you see them should be doing, right? As that transformation happens, how should these companies think about themselves when we think about the past and then with a view into the future? And I think a lot of them are going through those transitions as well.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think we hear all the time about, we think in linear terms, but the world is moving in exponential terms, right?
Yes.
Going faster than all of us, can sort of grasp.
Exactly.
And I think when you translate that idea of wanting to have exponential performance and being able to deliver exponential value through these new digitization and excess of service capabilities.
Yes.
What's important is that some markets, like the taxi industry, were waiting to be disrupted. There was no, the sort of alternative was literally, something that was sort of pre-IBM mainframe. And that's just not the case in the rest of industries. There's much more nimble on top of it players starting from much greater position of strength as incumbents, whether what industry it's in, pharmaceuticals, financial services, or high tech.
Yes.
So what that really means is that companies are asking themselves, how do we take our fundamental advantages and really amplify them through digitization?
Yes.
And what they're finding is that advantages are what people do. And so when they're in this how phase, companies are asking themselves a lot of fundamental questions about the way they organize for success and how they lead through success.
Yes.
What kind of culture do they need to have in order to be successful?
Yes.
So one thing I would say to the sellers listening to this, as companies go through this how phase, it's important to know that there are a lot of unanswered questions in the mind of customers, like how do I organize for digitization? What best practices have proven to be successful in digitization? As you deliver these new excess of service capabilities, what's the right way to measure that? It's a tremendous amount of thought leadership knowledge still being created just as we speak, and I think that's the kind of conversation I think that customers are having, and they're looking for people that they know can bring some value to that.
Yes, definitely. And I think in your work is exactly what you were just saying. There are several places where there's touch points with the customer that are happening, but that conversation is not necessarily led by the salesperson alone, but it's almost across the board how content is put in front of that customer, right?
Yeah,
how are you managing against that?
Yeah, I think you really nailed it there. I think that I'll give you a statistic here at Cisco's Customer Experience Center. When I first got this job, we used to call it the Executive Briefing Center a Cisco Out Experience, right? Yeah. We positioned it and that as the value you received. About 70% of our attendees were from the IT industry. If we sort of flipped our experience and took an outside-in customer perspective and built around that goal, the audience shift to about 70% line of business. So it had almost a complete inversion of who's visiting. And what's critical about that is, and I would say this is where I know your thought process has also evolved to feel this way, that the line of business people that are there to come and understand what digitization means to them, they're largely thinking about this in narrative terms, in horizontal narrative terms. They're not thinking about it in product terms or in feature terms. They think about it in, what is sort of the narrative of what we're trying to achieve as a company?
Yes.
What is the sort of capability we need to build? And it, by definition, cuts across silos.
Yes, exactly.
I think an entirely new way of thinking about content needs to be put in front of the customer from where we were. And it's going to be a struggle for a lot of sellers who grew up in the product era, where the roadmap was the goal, versus the narrative across a set of line of business leaders in a vertical.
Yes.
That's, I think, one of the great growth and development objectives for all of us as sellers.
Absolutely, and that essentially then maps into that customer experience that whether they are, you're getting a service from your organization buying a product, when they are doing that, whatever process they're touching, it is actually a multi-business unit process. Right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I think that. I think that the multi-business unit in the way we organize content and stories around the business unit.
Yes.
For the company and the vendor. And it might have worked for the company and the vendor with one audience, like an IT department.
Yes.
But as soon as you start to introduce multiple audiences at the line of business, multi-business unit conversations quickly fragment into, I'm not really sure what you just said.
Yes.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, it's just natural evolution of where we are. People really are expecting sellers and the companies they represent to show up with a narrative that works horizontally across their customer, not a feature that solves a problem in a particular department of the customer.
Exactly. That's terrific, Ron. We'll pause here and kind of mark this as the end of the first portion of our conversation. We'll go off to a commercial break, and when we come back, I want to get some specifics from you for how sellers can really think about that conversation in terms of how do we put forth and how we have with their own customers. We'll be right back. Thanks, Ron. We're back here. And now we want to retake this conversation to the next stage and think about, I love the fact that, part of what you're doing on a daily basis is having a lot of these customer conversations. And when we've been thinking about, sellers today and the transformation that's happening around excellent service, and I've been thinking a lot about that account manager and how the role is changing. Even the fact that now the customer is actually not necessarily interested in what product they're going to give them, but actually in a whole other set of factors such as service level, the security of their data, the reliability on the long term. So stepping back and talking to these sellers, what do you advise them to do in terms to become really successful in these conversations? And then we'll come back and connect the dots with other people that might be bringing value to that conversation.
Thank you for tuning in to the Top 1% Sellers podcast. Give us your suggestions and guest recommendations by emailing us at ash@connectwithash.com. Thank you also for sharing this podcast with your colleagues and social media contacts. To connect with us on LinkedIn, please send a connect request to ash@connectwithash.com. See you at our next episode. Thanks for tuning in.